In the deep stillness before dawn, the medieval librarian wakes slowly, not with urgency, but with the soft ache that comes from sleeping on a simple straw mattress laid over a wooden frame that creaks with the slightest movement. The room is cold, as stone chambers almost always are, and the faint smell of old parchment seems to linger even here, carried on his cloak from the day before. He sits up gradually, letting the chill settle around him in a way he has grown used to, breathing slowly and quietly, as though trying not to disturb the unmoving air. Nothing rushes him. There is no hurry. The day begins the way most of his days begin, in silence, in stillness, in the gentle realization that everything he will do today will look remarkably similar to what he did yesterday. With slow fingers, he reaches for a small beeswax candle resting on a rough wooden table. Lighting it is a familiar ritual, one practiced so often that each movement feels like part of a memorized rhythm. The flint sparks quietly, barely audible, and the wick catches with a hesitant glow. The faint flame sways, casting long, soft shadows that stretch lazily across the uneven walls. He watches the flame for a while, longer than he needs to, simply letting its warmth settle into the room inch by inch. In these early moments, the candle is not merely a tool. It is a companion for the quiet hours ahead. The library will be just as dim, just as cold, just as sleepy. And this little light is the only thing guiding him into another slow and uneventful day. He pulls on his heavy wool robe next, layer after layer, each piece as plain and practical as the last. The fabric is coarse, and it brushes against his skin in a way he hardly notices anymore. The robe hangs loosely, shaped more by years of wear than by its original stitching. He secures it with a simple cord belt, tying the knot with hands that move without thought. There is nothing elegant about the garments, but they suit a life spent among shelves, inkpots, and quiet manuscripts. As he folds the hood over his head, the world feels a little smaller, a little softer, wrapped in wool and silence. These quiet moments are always the same, and because they are always the same, they feel strangely comforting. When he steps into the hallway, the monastery is still asleep. The stone corridor stretches into dimness, lit only by the tiny halo of his candle. Each footstep echoes softly, though not loudly enough to disturb anyone else. The air is cool and still, and he moves at a pace that matches the quiet, slow, unhurried, almost drifting. He passes narrow windows, where the first hints of dawn rest faintly on the glass, barely strong enough to compete with the candle's little flame. This walk is one he knows by heart, a path taken so many times that even with his eyes closed, he could count each step, each shadow, each turn, leading him toward the room where he spends most of his waking hours. He reaches the library door and pushes it open gently, as though afraid the wood might protest with a creak. Inside, the air is cool and heavy with the familiar scent of old parchment, ink, and polished wood. The shelves stand as they always do, tall, dark, and slightly uneven, filled with manuscripts that rarely move and rarely change. The silence inside feels even thicker than the silence outside, and he stands for a moment simply absorbing it, letting the room welcome him with its stillness. The small candlelight flickers over the nearest shelves, revealing dust motes drifting slowly in the air, as if the room itself is waking from a long sleep. Here, The day begins not with activity, but with contemplation, a quiet acknowledgement that the hours ahead will unfold slowly and predictably. The librarian begins the quiet routine he has repeated almost every morning for years, dusting the wooden shelves that line the library walls. He moves slowly, not out of laziness, but because the shelves themselves seem to encourage gentle movements. Each stroke of the cloth is soft, deliberate, and unhurried, lifting thin layers of dust that have settled overnight. The wood beneath is old and slightly warped, but familiar under his fingertips. He pauses often, not because he needs to, but simply because the stillness invites pauses. Dusting these shelves rarely changes anything. The dust always returns, yet the ritual brings a kind of steady comfort, marking the slow beginning of another uneventful day. Once the shelves are cleared, he begins examining a row of manuscripts, lifting each one carefully as though they might crumble at a touch. The bindings are delicate, many stitched together decades ago by hands just as patient as his. He checks for loose threads, cracked edges, or pages beginning to curl. Most of the time, he finds nothing urgent, only the slow, natural aging that comes from years of quiet existence. He smooths corners gently and aligns pages so they sit evenly, taking his time with each manuscript. The process is repetitive, unexciting, and soothing, the kind of task that stretches time into a long, uninterrupted calm. A small corner of the library holds tightly rolled scrolls, tied with faded threads. They hardly move from their places, but the librarian checks them anyway. He lifts them one by one, feeling the slight variations in weight and texture. Some scrolls crackle faintly as they shift. Others remain tightly wound, still strong despite their age. He unties one, slowly, just to be sure the text inside remains readable. The parchment unrolls with a gentle sigh, the ink lines steady and dark. Satisfied, he rolls it back, just as slowly, tying the thread in the same simple knot used by countless librarians before him. The scrolls go back on the shelf exactly where they were, unchanged but acknowledged. Along one wall sits a row of small, smooth stones, marked with simple symbols, the monastery's primitive cataloging system. Each stone corresponds to a manuscript, allowing the librarian to keep track of works without needing to disturb them unnecessarily. He kneels beside them, adjusting their positions with quiet precision. Some have tilted slightly during the night, perhaps nudged by a passing draft. He sets them upright again, aligning them in a neat, patient row. The task is easy, almost trivial, yet he performs it with the same care he gives to the manuscripts themselves. These stones are the silent memory of the library, and tending to them feels like tending to time itself. With the shelves straightened, the manuscripts checked, the scrolls inspected, and the stones aligned, the librarian returns to the center of the room and stands in the quiet. This moment comes every morning, a brief pause before the day's writing begins. He listens to the soft hum of silence, a sound so constant it disappears until he intentionally seeks it. The candle flickers beside him, its warm glow steady and patient. This calm is the heart of his work, the stillness that surrounds the slow act of preserving words that may never be read by many, yet must be cared for with unwavering devotion. He breathes in deeply, letting the quiet settle around him like an old friend. After his quiet meal, the librarian walks back through the corridor toward the scriptorium, the room where copying and writing consume the largest portion of his days. The air here feels slightly warmer, carrying faint traces of drying ink and scraped parchment. Sunlight drifts through high windows, forming long rectangular shapes on the stone floor shapes that seem to stretch a little more with each passing afternoon. The librarian moves to his usual place near the far wall, where a wooden desk waits with quills neatly arranged like sleeping birds. He settles onto the stool, adjusting his robe and allowing his eyes a moment to rest, blinking slowly in the dusty light. This transition is always quiet, almost ceremonial, the peaceful crossing from morning care tasks to the long, still work of copying texts. Nothing in this room urges him to hurry. Every surface, every tool, every page seems content to remain untouched unless guided by his patient hands. Before he begins any writing, the librarian carefully trims his quills. He selects one from the row, holding it between his fingers, feeling the familiar weight of the feather. Using a small knife with a finely honed edge, he carves the tip slowly, shaving thin curls of material that fall soundlessly onto the desk. This process takes time, but he performs it with the kind of calm mastery earned through decades of repetition. Each adjustment to the nib, whether narrowing its slit or sharpening the point, determines how smoothly it will glide across parchment. The room is so silent that he can hear the faint scrape of the blade and the soft whisper of falling shavings. When he finishes with one quill, he moves to the next, never rushing, never forcing precision. By the time the final quill is trimmed, the afternoon light has shifted slightly, warming the edge of the desk. He brushes the shavings aside with the back of his hand, leaving the surface clean and ready. With his tools ready, the librarian selects the manuscript he intends to copy today, an old text filled with reflections on patience and silence, fitting companions for long afternoons. He dips the quill into a pot of dark ink, tapping the excess gently against the edge. The parchment before him is smooth, prepared by hand earlier in the month. He lowers the quill and begins to write, each letter forming with deliberate strokes. The movement is unhurried, almost meditative. The scratching sound of the quill is steady, blending seamlessly with the soft creaks of the wooden desk as he shifts occasionally in his seat. Writing like this takes long hours. There are no shortcuts, no quick methods, only the slow rhythm of ink meeting parchment. Every few minutes, he pauses to stretch his fingers, rotate his wrist, or simply breathe deeply before continuing. The sunlight drifts across the room with imperceptible speed, marking time not in minutes, but in long, peaceful stretches. After several pages, the librarian sets the quill down and closes his eyes briefly. Long hours of careful writing strain even the most experienced hands and eyes. He leans back slightly, letting the tension in his shoulders soften. When he opens his eyes again, he takes in the room around him. Rows of empty desks waiting for occasional visiting scribes, shelves holding ink pots and parchment rolls, and beams of warm light cutting through tiny particles of dust suspended in the air. There is no movement except his own breathing, the same stillness that existed when he first entered the scriptorium remains unchanged. He enjoys these moments, the quiet spaces between tasks where time feels almost frozen. It gives him a chance to remember that his work, slow as it is, preserves knowledge from fading into nothingness. The afternoon stretches on peacefully, offering no surprises, no interruptions, only calm. 5. When his hands feel steady again, the librarian returns to the manuscript and writes the final lines of today's passage. His quill glides more slowly now, the ink slightly thicker in the pot as it cools. He completes the page and lifts the quill, allowing the last stroke to dry. He examines the finished sheet carefully, checking for smudges, uneven letters, or stray marks. Satisfied, he places a thin sheet of blotting parchment over it and sets it aside to dry completely. This marks the quiet conclusion of his writing for the day. Though much remains to be done before evening arrives, he takes a moment to stretch his fingers and straighten his back. Outside, the light begins its slow transition toward the softer colors of early evening. The librarian feels no rush, no pressure, just the gentle continuation of a routine that has shaped his life for years. He gathers his tools and prepares to return to the library shelves once more. As the afternoon quietly folds into evening, the librarian rises from his stool in the scriptorium and moves once more toward the library's main hall. His steps are unhurried, almost drifting, as though his body has adopted the pace of the dust motes, floating lazily in the beams of fading light. The corridor between the rooms feels cooler now, the warmth of the day slipping gradually from the stones that line the walls. When he reaches the library door, he pauses not to think, but simply to breathe, allowing the stillness on the other side to meet him with its familiar welcome inside. The shelves stand like silent sentinels, tall and unmoving, their shadows growing longer as the sun lowers behind the distant monastery courtyard. The air feels different in the evening, touched by a gentle heaviness that settles over the room as though the books themselves are preparing for rest. The faint scent of parchment, warmed slightly through the afternoon, now cools again, returning to the soft, earthy smell that accompanies night. The librarian walks between the shelves, running his fingers lightly across the bindings. Not to inspect, he has done enough of that today, but simply to reconnect with the quiet order of the place. Each spine carries its own history of wear. The faint cracking on a leather surface, a stitch slightly loosened from years of careful use, a corner softened by the hands of monks who touched it decades before. These small details calm him, reminding him that his work is part of a lineage far older than he is. He reaches a shelf near the back where the evening light falls in a long, narrow strip across the floor. The warm glow gives the dusty air a golden softness, as though the library itself is drifting into a peaceful dream. He stands in that patch of light for a few moments, letting it warm the sleeves of his robe. The stillness settles deeper with every passing second, and even the faint echoes from the cloister seem too quiet, themselves out of respect for the approaching night. The library feels different, not less alive, but slower, deeper, almost meditative. It is in these evening hours that the librarian senses most clearly the weight and age of the place, and the gentle responsibility he carries within it. With the evening light fading into deeper amber tones, the librarian retrieves a soft cloth from a small drawer and turns his attention to the oldest shelf in the room, the one few monks dare to touch without need. These volumes, bound in thick, darkened leather, have survived centuries of handling, weather, repairs, and the slow, inevitable wearing down of time. They rest like elders in a quiet community, deserving of respect, caution, and above all, patience. He lifts the first volume gently from the shelf, supporting its weight with both hands. The leather is cool to the touch, its surface textured with small ridges where age has cracked the die. He places it on a nearby table, its thud soft but distinct in the nearly silent room. Taking the cloth, he begins to wipe the cover with slow, circular motions, never pressing too hard, never rushing. Dust rises in small clouds, illuminated briefly by the faint, remaining sunlight before disappearing into the dimming air. The process takes time, far more time than it needs. Some might say, but he prefers it this way. Each careful motion allows him to fully appreciate the book's presence, the slight give of the thick cover, the feel of the cloth gliding over its surface, the quiet whisper of particles lifting away. The library has no schedule. No bells ring to mark how long a book should be cleaned. He continues only when the moment feels right, when the surface is clean. He opens the book slowly, letting the pages shift with a soft rustle that seems almost louder than it should in such a still room. Inside, the parchment glows faintly in the evening light. He checks for signs of wear, edges fraying, ink fading, corners curling from humidity long past. Most pages remain sturdy, strengthened by the careful repairs his predecessors made decades or centuries before he ever set foot here. He closes the volume again, holding it for a few still breaths before returning it gently to its place on the shelf. Then he takes down the next book, and then another. Time drifts, but he does not measure it. The room grows dimmer, the outside world settles further into dusk, and the librarian continues dusting as though he were simply helping the books prepare for sleep. As darkness gathers slowly around the upper arches of the library, the librarian makes his way to the back alcove, a narrow, curved space where the monastery keeps its oldest scrolls. Unlike the books on the shelves, these scrolls rest in wooden slots carved directly into the stone wall, each slot labeled with small hand-painted marks indicating origin, age, or subject. This alcove is cooler than the rest of the library, and the air here feels almost still enough to hold its breath. The librarian steps inside, his sandals pressing gently against the worn floor. He kneels beside the lowest row of scrolls and begins the slow task of organizing them. He removes each scroll from its slot with both hands, supporting the core to prevent strain on the fragile parchment wrapped tightly around it. He examines the outer layer, checking for loose threads from the linen ties, for specks of dust or small spots that might indicate moisture that has crept in. Most scrolls remain in good condition, thanks to centuries of careful storage. But he still looks at each one as though it were a delicate relic unearthed from the ground. The room is so quiet that the soft tap of the wooden rod of each scroll touching the table sounds like a distant knock. He cleans the slots slowly, wiping away dust that collects in their corners over months. Then he rewinds each scroll, tightening it gently and ensuring the linen tie is secure, neither too loose nor too tight. Every so often, he pauses to stretch his back or rest his hands on the table, feeling the cool wood beneath his palms. These pauses are part of the routine. Moments where he lets the silence settle through him like a calm fog. By the time he reaches the top row of scrolls, the alcove has grown dimmer, the fading daylight replaced by the soft flicker of a small oil lamp he lit earlier. The flame wavers occasionally, sending shadows dancing across the curved stone wall, making the alcove feel even more ancient, like a space untouched by time. He continues, working slowly, methodically, allowing the evening to stretch on without urgency. The scrolls remain patient, resting in their stone homes, and the librarian steady.com and accustomed to slow tasks matches their stillness with his own. When the scrolls are organized, the librarian returns to the main desk by the window. Night has nearly arrived, and the colors of the sky outside have shifted to deep blue, with only a hint of fading gold along the horizon. He lights another small lamp, placing it on the desk so its glow spreads gently across the parchment waiting for him. This is the part of the day where he writes notes for tomorrow's work-a-slow, reflective task that helps him prepare his mind for the next cycle of duties. He dips his quill softly into a small pot of ink and begins writing in small, careful strokes, a reminder to check the moisture levels in the northwest corner, a note about a volume whose stitching may need reinforcement, a list of pages that must be copied before winter sets in. None of these tasks are urgent, but writing them helps preserve the steady rhythm of the library's routine. His handwriting is small, even, and steady, the letters forming gently on the parchment like footprints in fresh snow. Every few lines he pauses, not because he must, but because he enjoys these moments of quiet contemplation, moments where his mind wanders gently through memories of past years, past repairs, past scribes who once worked in this very room. The library around him has nearly fully surrendered to darkness now, with only the lamps providing small islands of warm light. The stillness feels deeper, almost velvety, wrapping around him like a soft, heavy blanket. He writes slowly, aware that each stroke of ink contributes to the long, unbroken history of the place. When he finishes the last note, he gently blows on the ink to help it dry. Then he sets the parchment aside, placing a small weight on one corner so it doesn't curl. The simple act of preparing for tomorrow gives him a quiet sense of satisfaction, as though he is helping guide the library's future one slow page at a time. When his notes are complete, the librarian extinguishes one lamp and carries the other as he walks slowly through the library, preparing it for the night. He checks every shelf, not to work, but simply to confirm that everything rests in calm order. The flame flickers against the bindings, casting moving shadows that ripple gently like water in low light. He closes the windows, ensuring they are latched against the cool night air. He passes his hand along the familiar tables, feeling the smooth grains of old wood beneath his fingers. These tables have supported thousands of manuscripts, dozens of scribes, and countless hours of quiet labor. Near the door, he pauses and looks back across the entire room. In the soft lamplight, the shelves stand tall and steady. The scroll alcove rests in darkness except for a faint glow, and the dust floats slowly through the warm air like drifting stars. It is a peaceful sight, one he sees every night, yet it never loses its quiet power. He blows out the final lamp, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint moonlight creeping through the highest windows. Then he closes the heavy door, its wooden echo rolling gently through the corridor. The library sleeps again, preserved in silence, waiting patiently for another day. When the last traces of daylight slip away behind the monastery walls, the medieval librarian pauses in the center of the scriptorium, letting the silence settle again in the way dust settles upon unused shelves. The hall is dim now, lit only by a handful of lamps, whose flames sway with delicate movements, stretching soft shadows across rows of wooden desks and tall book cabinets. The long beams of the ceiling disappear into darkness, giving the room a gentle, cavern-like quiet as if the books themselves are resting after a full day of being handled, consulted, or simply watched over. He stands still, absorbing the hush. The air carries a different smell at this hour, the faint warmth of extinguished candles, the dryness of parchment cooling after a day of use, and a trace of evening chill drifting through the high windows. It is a moment of transition when the activity of the day slips into the calm of night, and the librarian feels the shift not just in the room but in his own breath. He moves slowly between the tables, checking that quills are put away, ink pots are sealed, and parchment sheets lie flat without curling at the edges. Every small gesture is part of a ritual he has performed countless times. He runs his fingers lightly along the spines of the manuscripts on a nearby shelf, not to read them, but to acknowledge them, as one might pass a hand over the heads of sleeping animals in a stable. The books need no comfort, but after years of working beside them, he has adopted these small habits, almost without noticing. A faint sound breaks the silence, a single drop of melted wax falling from a candle stub. It lands with a soft tap, barely noticeable. Yet in this stillness, it echoes more clearly than footsteps in the daytime corridors. The librarian follows the sound to one of the desks nearest the window, where the last burning candle stands short but steady. He watches the flame dance for a moment, mesmerized by the way the light flickers across parchment, highlighting fine ink strokes left earlier in the afternoon. He does not hurry to extinguish it. Night is coming, but night always comes slowly inside the library, lingering just long enough to let the room drift into its own peaceful sleep. When he finally leans forward to pinch the flame between wetted fingertips, he does so with a kind of reverence, as though completing the final line of a long, gentle story. Darkness deepens, settling softly across the stone floor and wooden shelves. The librarian breathes in the calm, allowing the weight of the day so quiet, so uneventful, so perfectly ordinary to dissolve around him. And with that, he turns toward the door, his key warm in his hand, ready to begin the nightly ritual of closing the library. After leaving the library, the librarian steps into the hallway that leads toward the living quarters. The corridor is long, lined with stone arches that disappear into shadow as lamplight fails to reach their far ends. At night, this passageway becomes a world unto itself, silent, slow, and echoing with its own soft emptiness. His footsteps fall gently on the stone floor, not loud enough to disturb anyone, but just present enough to remind him that he is the last person awake in this part of the monastery. The torches along the wall burn low, their flames sounding more like a whisper than a fire. Every so often, a small crackle breaks the silence, but the sound is swallowed quickly by the stillness that surrounds him. As he walks, he runs his fingers lightly along the rough texture of the wall, the stone cool beneath his touch. The routine is comforting, the end-of-day sequence of motion, one he has followed for many years, perhaps more than he can easily count. The corridor bends slightly, revealing another stretch of dimly lit space. Somewhere far off, a faint breeze moves through one of the upper windows, carrying with it the scent of night air, damp earth, old wood, and the faint sweetness of herbs from the cloister garden. He pauses beside an open archway that overlooks the garden, gazing out at the dark silhouettes of plants swaying gently in the breeze. The moon casts a pale glow over the courtyard, turning the shapes of tall plants into soft, wavering shadows. For a moment, he simply stands there, breathing in the night. Nothing happens, nothing changes. The world holds still, and that stillness is a kind of quiet comfort he never grows tired of. The simplicity of the moment reminds him of why he cherishes this life, not for excitement, but for the predictable, soothing cadence of days that flow into nights with the gentlest rhythm. When he finally turns away from the archway, he resumes his slow walk down the corridor, taking his time, letting the calm guide his steps. The night stretches before him, unhurried, inviting him toward rest with the quiet promise of another peaceful dawn. When the librarian finally reaches his chamber, he closes the heavy wooden door behind him with the gentlest push, careful not to let it echo in the quiet of the night. Inside, the room is dark, but not unfriendly. It is the kind of darkness that feels familiar, shaped by years of returning to the same four walls. He lights the small clay lamp on his table, its quiet flame giving just enough glow to reveal the simple objects around him: the writing box, the folded blanket, the small wooden cross pinned above the bed. He lowers himself onto the chair beside the table and exhales slowly, allowing the weight of the day to settle around him. This is the time he sets aside, not for work, not for reading, but for reflections, unstructured thoughts that drift like smoke in the still air. His mind wanders back through the hours of the day, the quiet sorting of manuscripts, the steady copying of text, the soft conversations with visiting brothers, and the brief moments of idle observation when a loose thread of sunlight drifted across a table. None of it is remarkable, none of it is dramatic, yet it forms a pattern he finds deeply reassuring. In a world where storms, wars, and misfortune sometimes shape the lives of others, he is grateful for the predictability of his work. Books do not rage, nor do they rush. They simply wait, allowing their keepers to move at a pace the heart can easily follow. He picks up a blank piece of parchment, not to write anything formal, but simply to let his hand wander across the surface. The quill moves slowly, tracing shapes that hold no meaning. It is not about creating words. It is about letting his thoughts settle, one gentle line at a time. When he puts the quill down, he closes his eyes and listens to the faint crackle of the lamp. There is no hurry to extinguish it. The night is patient, and he allows his breathing to slow to the same quiet rhythm. This room, these soft shadows, and the small flame before him of it becomes a cradle for the mind, inviting the kind of peaceful reflection that makes sleep come easily when the time arrives. The librarian rises from his chair and prepares to end the day. He folds the parchment neatly, places the quill back in its box, and gently closes the lid. Each movement is small, but each carries the same rhythm of calm finality that comes with the closing of a day lived slowly. He moves toward the window and lifts the wooden shutter slightly. A cool breath of night air enters the room, brushing lightly against his face. Outside, the sky is a deep, velvety blue, dotted with faint stars that shimmer just enough to give the impression of quiet company in the distance. The garden below is still, its outlines softened by darkness, its scents carried upward by a mild breeze. The librarian rests his hands on the window frame, letting the night fill his senses. Stillness, the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft rustling of leaves. He closes the shutter again, not because he wishes to shut out the world, but because the room feels complete with only the lamp's glow. He changes into his nightrobe, the fabric worn from years of use, comfortable in the way familiar things often are. He kneels beside the bed for a brief moment of silent prayer, not spoken aloud, but felt inwardly, a simple gratitude for another day spent in service to knowledge, quiet work, and peaceful routine. When he rises, the weariness of the day finally settles into his limbs, but it is not the harsh fatigue of labor. It is the gentle heaviness that comes from slow, steady effort. He sits at the edge of the bed and watches the lamp's flame flicker softly, allowing himself one last moment of waking stillness before sleep. The librarian leans forward and gently extinguishes the lamp flame with a soft breath. Darkness settles around him slowly, like a blanket being drawn over the edges of the room. The familiar outlines fade into shadow. The table, the chest, the small writing box, the folded robe he will wear again in the morning, all become part of the quiet stillness that fills the chamber. He lies down on the straw-filled mattress, pulling the wool blanket over himself. The bed creaks faintly under his weta, small, familiar sound that has accompanied countless nights before this one. As his eyes adjust to the dimness, he listens to the distant, almost invisible sounds of the monastery at rest. A soft gust of wind outside, the faintest drip of water far down the corridor, the settling of wooden beams as the night cools. These sounds do not disturb him. They remind him that the world continues its slow, gentle rhythm, even when all the lamps are out. He breathes deeply, letting the last threads of thought unwind. The pages he handled today, the books he tended, the quiet conversations he overheard, and the moments of stillness that filled the spaces between tasks. Nothing extraordinary happened. Nothing dramatic marked the hours, and yet the day feels whole, complete, and meaningful in its calmness. As his breathing slows and his thoughts drift into the soft haze between waking and sleep, the librarian settles into the comfort of knowing that tomorrow will come quietly, just as today did. Another dawn, another calm set of routines, another peaceful day among books that wait patiently in the stillness. With one final exhale, he lets himself sink into rest, allowing the night to carry him gently into sleep. The story ends in silence, right where it belongs.